So my pitch to you is that the problem of democracy is actually that democracy is one of the easiest forms of political system to kind of hollow out from the inside. And as you said, I've got a book that's just come out called How to Rig an Election. When we started doing the research for that book, we thought we were going to find relatively significant problematic levels of electoral manipulation around the world, but sort of 20–25%. What we actually found was really striking. It stunned us. We're talking about something like every other election that is being held in the world today having significant manipulation of one kind or another. We're talking about elections that on average are such poor quality in some parts of the world that we're actually seeing the opposition win only 1 in 10 elections that are organized. In other words, elections that have effectively stopped challenging authoritarians, challenging poor leaders, kicking the bums out, but actually serve to legitimate the existing distribution of power. It's fantastic stories that we find in the book of the way these elections are being manipulated. A great one is from Madagascar, where Mark Ravalomanana, who's a very sort of famous leader in the country, a yogurt magnate, made his money in dairy. He wanted to win the election easily. His opposition leader was outside of the country. He decided that the best way to stop him from actually competing in the election was simply that every time he was flying to the country, keep in mind it's an island, he closed all of the airports unilaterally, right? The guy never managed to get into the country, he couldn't submit his papers, he wasn't on the ballot paper. The election on the day was pretty good quality. Why? Because you don't need to worry about the election on the day if you've excluded your most likely rival. So on the day, the election was pretty free and fair. What happened? International observers decided that the election was good enough to get a rubber stamp. Ravalomanana not only retained the presidency, but with the support of the international community. So my pitch here is the problem is not so much democracy, but that we have allowed democracy to be hollowed out of meaning. And it's not just that this is happening in far-flung tin pot dictatorships that you might think about in other parts of the world, post-communist Europe, sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, Latin America, where recently, for example, we could talk about the rigging of the election in Venezuela. It's not just that democracy is being hollowed out in those places. It's also at risk of being hollowed out in the United States and the United Kingdom as well. A classic example in the United States is that, as many of you will know, we have seen massive processes of gerrymandering whereby essentially leaders get to pick who votes for them rather than the other way around. In other words, we see places in the United States where we actually get people who are able to actually select the people voting for them by distributing constituency boundaries in that way. And what that means is that we actually see an awful lot of elections, both in the UK and the US, that are effectively uncompetitive, excluding large portions of the electorate from the political process. So my argument is that we don't need to abandon democracy, but we need a process of democratic renewal.